very much.
You're welcome.
Now, you okay? Yeah, 801 was that. I got Marianne's.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's 100, it's 1,000.
That's okay.
Anyway, my sister talked me to mine that in Ian is the plain tangerine nasty.
Anybody else need another one?
Did Vin get one?
Oh, thank you.
Ben, you gonna bring that home tonight?
I sure hope so.
I did that.
Well, I'll turn it on in a minute. For some reason, when I loaded the PowerPoint on this, it doesn't give me an icon that gives me the control like I had before, so I've got to learn how to do it. So in other words, before there was an icon, you could just turn it black. Now it just stays up all the time. Well, I don't understand why it's the same program. It's just there was an icon that, for presentation that was like a little arc. Good morning. Before we go, I'd like to read a card from Ben and Charlotte. It says, to my church family, thank you so much for the beautiful plant for Mom's memorial service. Your prayers, let's see if I can get this. You can see your prayers, and kindness throughout all our mother's journey is a wonderful testimony of Christ's light within. Your birthday cards made the otherwise dreary hospital room bright and cheery, and Mom looked at them often. Thank you again for your shining the light of our Lord Jesus Christ in our lives. Love, Ben and Charlotte, the family of Daisy Knott. So continue to remember, pray for Charlotte and family at this time. Again, we want to begin reading our kind of introductory text. It says in Romans 8:33 through 34, Who shall bring any charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who is to condemn? Now, if we have any sense of who we are, really who we are, we would walk away with the sense that God has all the right in the world to condemn us. Okay? There is more than adequate evidence, more than adequate examples of our failing God repeatedly and constantly. And so, if we have a sense of ourselves, really have a sense of ourselves, we would think, man, there's no hope. But this rhetorical question, who is to condemn? And then Paul, under the inspiration of the Spirit of God, gives 4 statements, so 4 pillars upon which we are confident. How does Romans chapter 8 begin?
There's therefore now no condemnation to them who are in Christ Jesus.
And so, why is there no condemnation? And he answers that question right here. The first that we looked at, Christ died. Secondly, more than that, who was raised. And then he gives yet a third one, and that is who is at the right hand of God. Now, what is it? That's the third one. Fourth one is interceding for us. He died. He raised again. He's seated at the right hand of God, and he's interceding for us. Anyhow, he's at the right hand of God. Have you ever heard the phrase, man on the inside? A man on the inside. What does that mean? Huh? Inner being, possibly.
You have the inside scoop.
You got the inside scoop. There's somebody there who is close to where it's happening that's close to you. Like, for example, if, let's say there's a famous person, president, governor, or whatever, and you'd like to see that governor or that president, whoever it is, there's somebody on the inside that knows the governor and knows you. Therefore, you have a man on the inside. Okay? Now, what the Bible is teaching us, and then I'll see if I can get this to work, because like I said, it's what we find here is that the Bible is... Did it turn on? Okay, it'll take a second. The Bible is just piles up things. When does Jesus... This is a trick question. When does Jesus cease being a man? He never will. Okay, so the Bible... Come on now. Technology. Okay. Was it 3? No, is it 1? No. Nope. I'll get here in a minute. Huh? Maybe. Like I said before, I had to figure this all out, but no, of course not. Okay. Hold on. I know why. Just a second. Should come up now. Please come up. I mean, just a few seconds. There we go. Yeah. Everybody. Yeah. This is a very familiar passage from Colossians 3, 1 through 14. It says this: if you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. So in other words, remember in Acts, here's the disciples, and they go with Jesus. They've been with him 50 days, and Jesus is taken up into heaven. Remember? And what do the angels say to the men of Galilee? Why stand you? This same Jesus is going up in heaven, is coming back. So Jesus ascended into heaven to sit at the right hand of God as a man. Not that he ceased being God, but you understand the picture is here. We have an inside man. At the right hand of God is Jesus Christ, Thomas Goodwin called him a common man. Now, what it means by common man in his lingo was that we share. So whatever is his is ours. Now pause and think about it. And it says here, he goes on, set your mind on the things that are above, not on the things that are on earth. For you have died. That is, who you were is gone, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appear, then you will also appear with him in glory. Paul says this, one of the reasons that we have no doubt or fear of condemnation is the fact that at the Father's right hand sits Jesus Christ, who is our common man.
When it says, who shall or who is to condemn, not even God himself can condemn us.
No.
That's amazing.
But the thing is, do not think that now you're in isolation. And we're going to sing a song, that rather right now, from our perspective, every second of every day, Jesus Christ sits at the Father's right hand in our behalf, in our interest, for our good. Never to leave, never to forsake, never to go away. And then we'll look at next time that he is up there. It says here, who indeed intercedes for us. And you see the way Paul's saying this, it's one thing. He died. Wow. He rose again. Wow. He's sitting at the right hand of God. Wow. He's interceding for us. And then then why in the world do you think it's possible for you to be condemned? How in the world? At this moment, we're going along, and how much of your day is occupied with Jesus Christ? How much of his day is occupied with you? Is there a moment in which you disappear from his conscious thoughts? And so we have to just rejoice and just relish in what God has done for us in his Son. And we're going to sing here in a moment. Ben's going to come up and us sing, See the Conqueror mounts in triumph. And the last stanza says, you have raised our human natures in the clouds of God's right hand. There we sit in heavenly places. There with you in glory stand. I mean, we have to understand it. And the writer of Hebrews actually puts us where? In chapter 13 it is. You know where it puts us? We are assembled in heaven. That's all right. It'll go off on its own. Maybe, okay, that's okay. So it'll go off on its own in a minute. Yeah. It'll go off hopefully, and we'll see what's going on. So let's pray, and then Ben will come and lead us. Father in heaven, I thank you for this day that you've given us, and I just pray that your mercy and grace would be upon us, and that we would relish in the fact that at your right hand, Jesus Christ sits in our behalf and for us. There is never a time in which Christ is not in your presence in our behalf. There is never a time in which he is separated from us. There is never a time in which you look at us independent of you looking at us through your Son. Our life is hidden with Christ, and because of that, there is no condemnation. I do pray that, Lord, you would bless us with these truths and encourage us to live a life that is profoundly pleasing to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
You know that destroys purgatory.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Charlotte and I are pretty sure that I've had it sometime and didn't know it and immune to it because I've been around it so much, but it's still, I suppose it's still nice to not be positive of that.
Is it an antibody test?
No, they
Oh.
don't test. No, that one's much more expensive. The free one is just to see if you have it right now.
Okay. See the conqueror mounts in triumph. See the King in royal state, riding on the clouds his chariot to his heavenly palace gate. Hark, the choirs of angel voices joyful alleluia sing, and the portals high are lifting to receive their heavenly King. Who is this as comes in glory with a triumphantly? Lord of battles, God of armies, he has gained the victory. He who on the cross did suffer, he who from the grave arose, he has vanquished sin and Satan, by death has spoiled his foes. You have raised our human nature in the clouds to God's right hand. There we sit in heavenly places, there with you in glory stand. Jesus reigns adored by angels, man with God is on the throne. Mighty Lord, in your ascension, by faith behold our own.
Well, that's a nice, powerfully written song. Not the easiest to follow. I don't know how you all felt, but
That song, I was looking at the lyrics, put it on YouTube, and it has 10 verses. And if I had been thinking, I'd put it in with the note, I'm going to do that next week. But it's a very, very good song. It's a hymn.
yeah. It is kind of, oh, go ahead.
Well, it was harder. I was trying to watch the notes.
I know.
I didn't catch the words, but the second verse, no, the first verse, as the conqueror mounts in triumph, see the king in royal state, riding on the clouds, his chariot to his heavenly palace gate. And I think of that song, Out of the Ivory Palace,
Yes.
he came, and now he went back in chariots, like who was the one that went chariot?
Elijah, yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting also, he came down alone. He went back with the multitude, with us.
Amen. You know, every time I see a song like this, whether you think of it as battle, whether you think of it as, my mind automatically goes to sporting events that I have to think of, but what I think of is, I think of, okay, my role in this is the same as the 48th player on the reserve squad of the team that never plays a single down in the game, and yet I still get a Super Bowl ring. It's kind of what it amounts to, all because of someone else's efforts. Oh boy. All right. Oh Christ, our hope, our heart's desire.
Redemption's only spring.
The last line of that last verse. Our only glory, may it be glory in the Lord.
Amen.
And will Christ be thou our lasting joy, our ever great reward.
That verse 2, how vast
Yeah.
the mercy and the love which laid our sins on thee. And I think of the word vast, just like our universe, a vast expanse and just beyond what you could ever even imagine.
And the unmistakable tie into the second half of that with the cruel death. Because it is so, again, it is a personal emphasis that I seem to have to stay on track. But the remembrance of what we've been forgiven of and the price that was paid for us to be forgiven is just, it's almost unconscious. I can't comprehend it. I keep on comprehending a little bit more of it all the time, but I'm nowhere close to having a clue. Amen.
Amen, amen.
All right. Do we have some praises?
The bands of death.
Testimonies?
I have one.
Yes.
I was reading through my Bible, read through the chronological today, and everybody can probably quote Romans 3:23, right? Well, I don't know how many times I've read this, but I've never really, it's not even a sentence, it's not a complete sentence, it's a comma. And it says in 24, and are justified by his grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus.
Amen.
It's just amazing that when you learn the Romans road, you can never look past 3:23, even though it's not even a complete sentence. And I didn't even realize that. All the times I read it, I didn't even realize that till today. So I'm thankful that the Lord can still show new things of things you've read a lot of times.
Amen.
That word grace, justified by grace as grace, means gift. Same thing. It's amazing. Grace means gift.
I'm really thankful the Lord's had me on a pretty productive path for about 5 weeks now. But He has allowed me to still do some things that are really important. Like yesterday, I did have a list of things I wanted to accomplish at the office. But I went over to help Ben with grunt work. My labor is the grunt work. I'm the low-paid laborer, the strong back. And anyway, I went over there about 11:15. I didn't leave until 7:15. Now, he left to go to the Thanksgiving celebration about 3. There was still other cleanup work I could do, and I wanted to get the work area so that the next time you wanted to tackle something, you could tie right into it instead of having to clean up a bunch of scrap lumber and all. And then my brother shows up to do some work on the heating air conditioning system, so I get to do the grunt work for him. Like, you know where this is? Do you know where this is? Can you and the reality is, it really did remind me, I was probably more valuable to them. How do I want to say it? That's not what I mean to say. I was more needed by them than I am in Christ's work. But the reality is, all the work that I do with Christ is, there's a much bigger gap between the skill levels, if you think what I mean. But I was so thankful to be able to be an encourager and be able to be a help. And even though I didn't get done some of the things that I wanted to get done, He's just helped me get so much done. It's just that I always think I can do a little bit more. It's like I'm not satisfied because I've done so much from a work standpoint, but there are so many more important things than just the things that exist at the office. So anyway, I was really thankful to be used like that and to have peace about it, is what I would say to you. So.
Are you going to testify about how your legs felt this morning?
No, I'm not. And I'm not going to testify about the Charlie horse that I got when I tried to get up off of the couch and stretch my legs. Yeah, there are signs that maybe I'm not quite as young as I used to be. Yeah, it's funny. I am glad for these negative tests because I do ache a lot after these things. I can tell that I'm working and I'm working muscles that I've not worked in a long time. But I come out okay. And I can say Charlotte got a new belt for me today that wouldn't have fit me 2 weeks ago. but I am at least able to get to the second hole, not the first hole, so.
I was reminded of something this week with Tim and Mindy there all week and trying to fix meals and clean up without water in a kitchen sink.
I was wondering if they came to visit before your kitchen sink was in.
Yes, but I did it several times. It came to my mind. I'm glad I was brought up the way I was. I can remember when we didn't have any running water in the house.
Yeah.
I can remember when my dad put an old pump in a sink in our kitchen. Then I can remember he dug up the yard and put some pipe in, and we had running water and a water heater that brought hot water. And I was a young kid, but I'm thankful I was brought up the way I was. That I can live this way.
Sure.
We can go into the bathroom and turn on and get hot water.
My brother George and I, who's 19 years older than I, have really good fellowship at this point in time. But he reminds me many times the difference between the household he grew up in 19 years earlier and the household I grew up in. And it really is kind of night and day, because he reminds me of the time when he used to sleep on the 3rd floor. They only had heat coming from the house, like from the equivalent of like a Franklin stove. And he said he used to have to put so many covers on him on the cold days of winter, because the house was also not well insulated, that your body almost ached, and you still were debating, am I going to lose more heat by going and grabbing that coat I see on the floor over there and adding it to the pile, or am I going to gain? Yeah, I've never experienced those kind of things, thankfully.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, I understand. Oh boy, I like it soft. And unfortunately, we're going to face persecution where those things are going to seem so incredibly minor, and we see it more and more. So I pray, Lord, toughens me up for that. Okay. Yes.
Carol and I will be celebrating our 43rd anniversary tomorrow. And we were just rejoicing last night in the Lord's goodness and mercy and faithfulness to us and bringing us together and what He has done. It's a testimony of Christ's work.
Amen. All right. Give to our God immortal praise. Give to our God immortal praise, mercy and truth are all His ways, wonders of grace to God belong, repeat His mercies in your song. Give to the Lord of Lords renown, the King of Kings with glory crowned. His mercies ever shall endure when lords and kings are known no more. He built the earth, He spread the sky, and fixed the starry lights on high. Wonders of grace to God belong, repeat His mercies in your song. He built the sun with morning light, He bids the moon direct the night. His mercies ever shall endure when suns and moons shall shine no more. He sent His Son with power to save from guilt and darkness and the grave. Wonders of grace to God belong, repeat His
5.
While Israel lived in Shittim, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. These invited people to the sacrifices of their God, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel yoked himself to Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. And the Lord said to Moses, "Take all the chiefs of the people and hang them in the sun before the Lord, that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel." And Moses said to the judges of Israel, "Each of you will kill those of his men who have yoked themselves to Baal of Peor." And behold, one of the people of Israel came and brought a Midianite woman to his family, in the sight of Moses, and in the sight of the whole congregation of the people of Israel, while they were weeping in the entrance of the tent of the meeting. When Phinehas the son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, saw it, he rose and left the congregation and took a spear in his hand, and went after the man of Israel into the chamber and pierced both of them, the man of Israel and the woman, through her belly. Thus the plague on the people of Israel was stopped. Nevertheless, those who died by the plague were 24,000. And the Lord said to Moses, "Phinehas the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, has turned back my wrath from the people of Israel, in that he was jealous with a jealousy among them, with my jealousy among them, so that I did not consume the people of Israel in my jealousy. Therefore say, Behold, I give to him my covenant of peace. And it shall be to him and to his descendants after him a covenant of a perpetual priesthood, because he was jealous for his God and made atonement for the people of Israel." The name of the slain man of Israel was killed with a Midianite woman was Zimri, the son of Salul, the chief of the father's house belonging to the Simeonites. And the name of the Midianite woman who was killed was Cosbi, the daughter of Zur, who was the tribal head of a father's house in Midian. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Harass the Midianites and strike them down, for they have harassed you with their wiles, which they have beguiled you in the matter of Peor, and in the matter of Cosbi, the daughter of the chief of the Midianite, their sister, who was killed in the day of the plague on account of Peor." God's people said, "Amen." You may be seated. Let me get this in here. We come to this chapter, and honestly, if you were going through it, who'd want to read it? I mean, you know, that's the thing about it. You go through some of these chapters, and is that something that you're going to sit down and memorize? Is it something that you're going to find like, wow, this is exciting and wonderful, and I'm going to come out of this with such good and warm feelings? So, generally speaking, unfortunately, we go to the Bible with a filter. We go to the Bible with a filter to hear what we want to hear, not to hear what God wants to say. Now, are we conscious of that? When you were a kid and your mom or your dad told you to do something, and when it came to the time when which, let's say they told you to clean up your room, and they said, "Why didn't you clean up your room?" You say, "I didn't hear you." Now, in many cases, you weren't really lying because you didn't hear him, because you what? You didn't pay attention. Now, that is itself can be a precarious situation with your parents. But one of the things that I'm noticing is that how we are quick to veto and filter God's words. And one of the only helpful remedies is to actually go through the Bible chapter by chapter, verse by verse, in order that we don't skirt things. Now, this is a chapter of massive contrast. In chapters 23 and 24, which we looked at last week, what we find here is, in chapters 23 and chapter 24, Balaam was hired to curse the people of God. And God said, no, you're not going to curse the people of God. In fact, there are 4 revelational blessings. The first is he declares to Balak the utter impossibility of cursing those whom he blessed. The second thing, basically, God says, I cannot, I'm not like you, I cannot, and I will not change my mind. It is settled. Nobody or no thing will be able to alter my purpose to bless my people. He goes on in the third revelation, the realization that this blessing is profound and effuse and expansive. And thirdly, or fourthly, that God would raise one up, a scepter out of Jacob, a star out of Jacob, and a scepter out of Israel, who would crush the head of Moab. And Moab is the picture of Satan. He's going to devastate and crush all the enemies of God. Now that's, and you walk away from those four oracles and you say, wow, what an absolute certainty. What an absolute assurance that God's people have. Now you come off of that high place down here to the ground, and things are unbelievably different. What I want to do is give you an outline of what takes place. And then we'll make some observations. First of all, the first thing that takes place is we find them located at Shittim, a little city, a little location, just 10 miles to the east of Jericho. Okay? So what's the closest, how far is, what's a city around 10 miles from here? Westville. So we're here, and Jericho is where Westville is. And that's the first city they're going to attack, isn't it? So how close are they to home? Real close, aren't they? They're just almost home. And so they're there, they're camped there, only 10 miles away from just stepping in. And then a very startling and uncomfortable description is given of the people of Israel. And deliberately so. This is not comfortable language, intentionally so. It says, as they were encamped at Shittim, they began to whore with the daughters of Moab. Now, contrast that with the kind of blessing that God has just pronounced upon them. It's like, what is going on here? These 23 and 24 and 25 are juxtapositioned deliberately. 25 is a shocking chapter intentionally. In verse 2, it describes what took place. The daughters of Moab, probably cult prostitutes, called out to the people and invited them to worship their gods. Come on over here, guys, it says in verse 2. These, that is the daughters of Moab, invited the people, and it's the idea, invited, called, beckoned, enticed the people of Israel to come and to sacrifice to their gods. And the scary thing is, they did. Chapter 3, or verse 3, describes what they did. It says they bound themselves, they yoked themselves to Baal of Peor. And this is, there's the language here is suggestive in a very uncomfortable way. Essentially, the idea is that they actually, a good part of the people of Israel actually joined worshiping Baal or Baal of Peor. Now, what in the world's going on? In verse Numbers 31 through 16, it tells us that this took place by the suggestion of Balaam. Okay? Now, God said to Balaam, you can't curse him. And Balaam couldn't. But you know what Balaam still wanted? He still wanted the money. So he came up with a way and a suggestion to Balak and said, listen, I can't curse them, but I can figure up a way that they will be in trouble with God. If you can just get them to side up and to worship your gods, then God will come on against them. And in Numbers 31, essentially, Moses said the reason why this took place is because of Balaam gave this enticement, this enticing instruction. And by the way, make sure he's killed. Balaam is actually executed when they go after Moab. So what happens? The Lord's anger breaks out against the children of Israel, and he commands Moses to execute all the chiefs of the priests and display their dead bodies in public. Now, this is like, this is like going to Congress and executing every single one of them and impaling their bodies in public. You go, what in the world's going on? These are the heads. These are the chiefs. These are the bottle washers. These are the heads of the tribes. And God says, "You, Moses, go out and you execute them and then basically probably hang or impale them in a public a demonstration of their judgment. What in the world is going on? Why in the world would God do that? It seems, you'll see this, it seems that the children of Israel's leadership utterly failed them. You know, what does it say in James about leaders? Don't be anxious to be a leader. Why? There's much judgment. The function of the leadership of Israel was to keep them safe from outside intruders. In the first prophecy of Balaam, it says of them that they are a nation separate, not counted among the peoples of the world. In other words, they were to be separate and distinct from all the peoples of the world. And one of the functions and responsibilities of the leadership was to keep them safe from the pollution of the world. And they what? Failed miserably. And consequently, God said to Moses, their heads are required. They should die because of their failure. Okay, come on. Moses, however, didn't seem to comply. Rather, if you read it, he altered the instructions to kill only those people who had yoked themselves to Baal. I mean, this was just a big mess. During this time, a particular egregious event takes place. Moses is at the tent of meeting, and there's a group of the Israelites gathered, and they're weeping. I'm sure they're weeping over what took place, how quickly and it seems almost instantaneously the people of God sistered up and yoked with and worshipped other gods. I would imagine they were weeping over what took place when God had struck down 24,000 people. And they were weeping, and Moses, and I'm sure they were distraught. And all of a sudden, here comes a couple, an Israelite man and a Midianite woman, hand in hand, walking to the family tent. Now, it's not just a normal word for tent. It's the word that is used for a cult place. So there was mischief going on here. This was some kind of worship setting in a sensual way. So they walk by right in front of Moses, right in front of these people who are weeping, brazen, arrogant, defiant. What are you going to do about it? So Phineas sees this, and he's just beside himself. They go on, he gets up, takes a spear, follows them in, and kills them both, probably in the midst of the acts of sex. And God says, finally. And it says he stills the anger from killing the people. Phineas' actions are carefully described as being prompted by a zeal for God, a jealousy for God. It says that Phineas was jealous or zealous with the zealous or jealousy I had. And because of this, Phineas is rewarded with a covenant of peace, which is a perpetual priesthood. God says, you did it right. Now, it's interesting. One of the functions of the Levites and of the various tribes was the protection and the sanctity of the people of God. They were to keep it pure and holy, and Phineas was simply executing his job. Now, what is interesting is that the couple is carefully named. The man's name is Zimri. He is of the tribe of Simeon. And the woman is named as Cosbi, who is the daughter of Sur, one of the princes of Midian. Now, why? Now, we don't know, but there's a lot of things connected. Okay, so what happens next? The next chapter is chapter 20, is the second census, and it gives all the lists of the tribes and the number of people. Okay, so if you compare the first list with the second list, you're going to find almost every tribe has almost identical numbers of people, except Simeon, the tribe of Simeon. it is down 37,300 people. It is a decrease of 62.5%. Now, I don't know for certain, but it may be that these 23 or 4,000 people that died actually belonged to that tribe, and this was a big indication of it. But these people are brought out, and their names are mentioned because they are a demonstration of the fury and wrath that God has against these people. And finally, Moses gives instructions to attack Moab for the evil that they had planned and designed against the people of Israel. Now, after having kind of given a brief discussion of this, the question obvious is, what in the world does this have to do with me? You know, what in the world is going on here? What's the purpose of all this? In 1 Corinthians 10:6, it says this, "Now these things took place," Paul's writing to the Corinthians, "as examples," what are the next two words? "For us, that we might not desire evil as they did." Now, in that passage, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, this event is specifically mentioned. Now, you might get shocked because it says 23,000 there. Here in Numbers, it's 24,000. It's just a round number. Could have been 23,587. It's approximation. But nonetheless, we're talking. And you know what that is? You know what 23 or 24,000? That's 2% of the population of Israel were killed in the plague of this event. So this is some serious stuff. So what in the world is God trying to communicate to us? Now, what you see this, how quickly did they turn from the one and true God to serve idols? How many times they do that? The first point, and this is so fundamental, the natural state of every human heart is idolatry. If you have the chance today, read through Ezekiel 20. It's very informative because it describes the children of Israel. And in this, chapter 20, it begins with the elders of Israel coming and they want to inquire through Ezekiel. They want to inquire through Ezekiel to God. And God says, "You want to ask me? You want to inquire of me? Forget it." That's my translation. It's over with. Why? And then what he does is he begins to give a historical overview of the children of Israel in the context of idolatry. In verses 7 and 8, he says, when God came to the Israelites in Egypt, he said to them, "I'm going to redeem you, I'm going to rescue you, but you need to cast off your idols." God called them to cast off the detestable things, and this is the language, that their eyes feasted on. But they would not. We have this idea that the Israelites are in Egypt and they're a pristine group. What Ezekiel tells us is that right there in Egypt, they were worshiping the Egyptian gods. And it says this of them, their eyes feasted on these. That's scary. In the wilderness, when they leave Egypt, they come to Sinai, God speaks to them, Moses goes up and gets the rest of the law, and what do the children of Israel do? Wait patiently to hear everything. What do? They make a golden calf. All right? In the wilderness, it says their hearts went after their idols. In verse 24, it says their eyes were set upon the idols of their parents. It says in verse 28, in the promised land, wherever they saw a high hill or a leafy tree, there they worshipped idols. What in the world? That is the history of the Israelites. Their hearts were always and perpetually given over to idolatry. So here, when all of a sudden the floozies from Moab batted their eyes, it wasn't a shock. It was who they were. Now, it's not only true of the Israelites, it's true of every human being born of Adam. We are born idolaters. Not as grossly as they are, but we are born with a desire, with a proclivity, with a passion to make God fit what we want. We want a God like us. We want a God who fits in. That's why we come to the Bible and we come to various ideas and passages and texts that we take offense to. You know what that says? Well, God, you're not the God I want. It exposes the reality of the natural heart that we don't want God. Romans 1 is another perfect illustration of this. Though they knew God, they glorified Him not as God, neither were thankful, became vain in their imaginations. And what did they do? They made for themselves idols, images of the Creator. And they worshiped the creature over the Creator, who is God blessed forever. Now, the scary thing, the thing that nobody wants to to really acknowledge, is the fact that that's true of every human being. Now, we're not going to go and cavort with the daughters of Moab, but your heart and mind naturally is going to form and shape a God who is not. And it will be far more comfortable and apparent and pretty than Baal was, or Molech, but nonetheless, not one human being ever born since Adam, wants God as He is. That's why Bob was telling in Sunday school, when you try to witness to people, try to show them the gospel, they want nothing to do with it. You know why? Because they do not want that God. You can give them another God, a God of their own liking, a God of their own making, a God of their own choosing, and man, you can sell that God upside one down the other. But the reality is, the nature of the human heart is that it is by nature idolatrous. And let's bring it up, because here it is, all these great blessings that God is going to bring on. And the very first response to the people of Israel in this context is, no, we want Balaam. Or we want Baal. Second thing, very important. In this incident, God establishes a pictorial representation of sin so that we get a sense and a feeling of the evil of it. It's interesting. In the United Kingdom and in Germany, for whatever reason, they decided to give a survey, and they asked people in those two countries to rate the 10 Commandments according to importance, from the top most important to the least important. The top important commandment was, thou shalt not kill. You know what the least important was? Thou shalt have no other God before me. What's a big deal? What is the big deal? Now, what is really interesting, what did God put first? Thou shalt have no other gods. Now, we are viscerally moved by someone killing another person. It bothers us, and rightfully so. But are we viscerally moved when someone else has another God than the one true God? Okay? We're not bothered by it too much, are we? Really? We will protest and make complaints with the bloodshed and violence we see on the streets of America, and rightfully so. But we are not at all losing sleep, generally, over the fact that God is not worshipped. So what God does is give us a language that stings. That is, that sin is likened to infidelity. And from this point on, you see a lot of times in which Israel's rebellion against God is used in these words, a whoring after other gods. You have been unfaithful. And if you want, read Jeremiah 3 and Ezekiel 16. Put your big pants on when you do, though, because it is stark language. And the purpose of this is say, don't think that idolatry is not a big deal. It is the big deal. It is the biggest of deals, though we do not feel it. So God gives us pictorial language so that we would sting. Remember, Jesus is talking. He says that they said, well, give us a sign. And then Jesus says to this generation seeks signs. And he describes the generation as an adulterous and wicked generation. Now, isn't that a strange thing to call a generation adulterous? James, he says, ye are adulterous people who would be friends with the world. Throughout the Old and New Testament, there is this constant language, this picture given, that every sin, no matter what shape or size it takes, is infidelity to God. It is adultery. It is a debauchery and a treachery of the worst sort. Human treachery is but a pale comparison to human treachery. The third point is God is very serious about the matter of idolatry. In that chapter we see, first of all, he says, you kill all the leaders. Now, I'm a leader. You go, wait a minute. And I think that's probably what Moses kind of said. Wait a minute. He goes, I didn't do anything. Yes, you did. You didn't keep the people safe from the Moabite women. I mean, that's pretty serious, isn't it? Kill all the leaders. That's what God commanded. And not just say, okay, give them a lethal injection, kill them, and then impale their bodies in the broad daylight so everybody knows how ticked off God is. You see also that God struck down 24,000, roughly, Israelites. Phinehas, in an act of violence, kills 2 people with a spear and quells and stays the wrath of God. Okay? And then God says, you go after those Midianites who caused this mess in the first place. Now, you know what it tells us, at least it ought to tell us? How disturbing idolatry is to God. God is very serious about the matters of idolatry, and it ignites his wrath. Now, just a few conclusions, points. First thing is, what's God's answer to an idolatrous heart? Now, you see this in Ezekiel. Because again and again, Ezekiel points out the utter failure and the inability for them to ever come and line up with God because of who they are by nature. By nature, not one of us wants God as he is. By nature, no one wants the true God. I didn't say people don't want God. They don't want the true God. What does God say in Ezekiel? The only remedy is to take out that idolatrous heart and give them a heart for God. The new birth. That's it. There's no other remedy. There's nothing you can do. You can't talk people into it. Okay? Because you can't talk people, it's like the old joke, you can't talk me into liking liver. You can't talk me into liking the taste of liver. Now, it may come if all of a sudden doctor said, you eat liver or die, I'll think about it. Okay? And if it was come to that, I'd probably go like this, eat it. But I will not like it. There's nothing that a person can do or say that will talk a person into loving and liking the one true God. That's why we're all idolaters. We just make a God we like. So the only answer that God has is the new covenant, to take out the old heart and put in a new. Now, the regenerate are not immune to the temptations of idolatry. Okay? Now, we don't have an idolatrous heart. But there's a lot of garbage left over from our regeneration that has the tendency to kind of draw us back into that sense. Paul admonishes the Corinthians not to be idolaters, as were some of them. Let me read for you in 2 Corinthians. Paul is talking. He says in verses 1 through 3, it says, I wish you would bear with me in a little foolishness. Do bear with me. For I feel, listen, a divine jealousy. Okay, what he says? I feel a jealousy like Phinehas felt. I am burning with a jealousy like you. Why? For you, since I betrothed you to one husband, to present you as a pure virgin to Christ. But I am afraid that as the serpent deceived Eve by his cunning, your thoughts will be led away from a sincere and pure devotion to Christ. Now, you know what? He's talking to saints. He's talking to Christians. And Paul says, I am jealous for you because Satan will come in and beguile you and turn your mind and turn your heart and turn your affections away from Christ, your heavenly husband, to other things. And Satan is a master at that. Satan is a master at pushing and prodding and jamming a wedge so that Christ is no longer the passion of our heart. Something else is. And often the thing that becomes our passion is a good thing, but not the ultimate thing. Satan is a master at that. Give you a human example. Husband and wife. They have children. All right? What inevitably happens with children and husbands and wives? Essentially, how much energy and focus is occupied on the children? Okay? In that, generally, you know what happens? Who ceases to be the most important? The husband and the wife, right? That's unbiblical. Now, does that mean children should be thrown out? No. But the problem with it is how easy it is for us to take the good and make it the ultimate. And Paul says, I'm jealous for you folks. I am so concerned that Satan will come in and beguile you, as he did Eve, away from a sincere and pure devotion to Christ. We are subject to those kind of temptations. Not like we're going to go with the women of Moab, but there are going to be things that Satan will throw in our way. Good things, right things, wholesome things, acceptable things, but things that if we lock onto them will turn our affections away from Christ to something else. And you know what God deems that? He deems that infidelity. Now, we want to identify our sins as big and little. Everybody else does big sins. I do little sins. Right? But every sin actually is embracing another God and a rejection of Jesus. Every sin. Covetousness, bitterness, envy, gossip. Every sin. Unforgiveness, you name it. Every sin we commit has the flavor of idolatry. And we have to be on guard, and I'll give you something here. Third point. We need something of the heart and spirit of Phinehas. We need a true zeal for God. Now you look at this story, and where do your sentiments lie? Do your sentiments lie, man, I'd hate to be one of the chiefs who God wanted to be killed. Right? And you think, oh, wasn't that kind of an overreaction to stab this couple? And you go, Phinehas, maybe he was a little wacko? Where do our sentiments lie? So much of the time our sentiments lie with people, not with God. Okay, most people look at this as 24,000 people killed. This couple were killed. What in the world's going on? Or God, what in the world's going on? You know what? Where do your sentiments lie? Do your sentiments lie with the holiness of God and the vindication of His name, or the preservation of dirty, rotten sinners? Sin is because people flip off God. And I deserve to be killed. I deserve to die as you deserve to die. And how little zeal we have for God. How we are not moved by the things that move God. If we were in this situation, God says, okay, how are you going to handle it? I guarantee you we wouldn't handle it like this. I guarantee it. We wouldn't be bothered by this like, God, come on, God, you're big. Put your big pants on. That's how we act. We have such, and that's why these chapters in the Bible are here. They're just those kind of like you can't swallow it, it sticks there. Because if we don't get this, we don't get God. If you cannot and comprehend of a God who is zealous for His own name's sake, and again, you read Ezekiel 20, and you know what? The only reason that there is an Israel, and the only reason that God is going to keep His promises to Israel has nothing to do with the fact He loves them. In Ezekiel 20, it basically says the opposite. He says, you people are deserving of nothing. But again and again and again, in 20 and in 36, you know what He says? The reason why He's going to restore the people, the reason why He's going to give them a new heart, you know why He says it? For His name's sake. And I've thought this question. If it weren't for God's name's sake, would He save any of us? Now, you don't hear that. You hear God loves you so much. There's no doubt about it. But ultimately, I think the bottom line motivation for God saving you isn't because he loves you, but because he loves his name. And you go, I don't like that. Of course, you don't like the God who is. You don't like the God who is. That's our nature, folks. I am so glad that God saved me for his name's sake, not because of me. I look in the mirror and I want to throw up. When you really, and I sit there in my chair and I think and I reflect back, oh my, have I failed you? There's no reason that you should save a wretch like me. Absolutely none. And God says, it isn't because of you, it's for my name's sake. I can sit back and rest. But you know what that means? It means that God, listen, that God is far more passionately occupied with his namesake than he is with us. I'll see if I get this fixed. I'll give the last one. It's an easy one. Last one is this. How in the world do we get God right? And the answer is to gaze at Christ in his glory. No man has seen God at any time, John tells us, but the only begotten God who is in the bosom of the Father, he's done what? He's declared him. One of the disciples said, Jesus, I think it was Philip, show us the Father and that'll be enough. And Jesus said, have I been so long with you that don't you understand that he that sees me has seen the Father? In Hebrews, in diverse manners in times past, God spoke to the prophets. God spoke through the prophets. But in these last days, he has spoken to us through his Son. And he goes on to describe who is the exact expression of the Father. It says in Colossians that in Jesus is the wholeness, the fullness of the Godhead bodily. You want to know what God's like? Make Christ your unending search. Gaze at him. Look at him. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of faith. Don't look in a mirror and say, why, I'm pretty good. That's what we do. You know, we kind of get Christianized. And we start looking at ourselves and say, man, I don't do those things. I don't do that thing. I'm so much better than that man and not as good. Maybe I got ways to go, but forget looking at yourself. Look at Christ. For only in Christ do you see God aright. Now, this chapter is, like I said, uncomfortable and, like who wants, let's go to the next chapter, and you go, well, it's a census, so I don't know if that's any better. That's the way we think. And when it comes to idolatry and all this kind of crude language and description of sin, that doesn't apply to me. We don't think it does. We don't feel that it does. My prayer this morning, before it came, is that God would bring it home. That God would just drive this truth to our hearts. Because whether or not we feel this to be true, this is God's estimation. And you know what is true of God's estimation? It's correct. I have problems or temptations with idolatry. Not that I'm going to go after the women of Moab, but I'm going to, or there's proclivity in my heart to refashion a God that I like. To reshape and to twist and so that he's more comfortable. And you know that because in our culture today, preachers don't want to talk about a God who sends people to hell, does he? We want to talk about a God who loves everybody and has great plans for everybody. And everything is going to turn out in the end. That's the kind of God we want. But that's not the God of the Bible, is it? So, you know what we're doing? We're hawking, we're selling, we're marketing an idol. And we feel good about it. You remember the video we saw? I mean, those people are so convinced that they're right. And you know what they're doing? They're hawking, they're selling, they're giving out balls of Peor, or balls of Danville, or balls of Minneapolis, or wherever it is. And they are not touched by it. And Christians are not touched by the fact that we are so prone, and more times than not, we have an idea of God that is wrong. And we're comfortable with it. So we're kind of in the same boat, but fortunately not the same boat as the Israelites. And so I pray and hope that you would go to Ezekiel 20 and read it, and meditate on it and think about it. And then make that as a platform to pray. God, search me and try me, because I know that there are places in my life and my thinking and my affections that view you or relate to you in a wrong way. And I don't want to be in any measure inflicted or affected or infected with idolatry. It's a possibility. Will you pray that? Let's pray. Father in heaven, this isn't a fun chapter. This isn't a pleasant topic. It's kind of crude. It is uncomfortable for a mixed audience. But it's a picture you paint more than once of what our sin really is like to you. It is adultery. It is infidelity. Whenever we sin, we are actually choosing and fabricating a God different than you. Lord, deliver us from that. Help us to be sensitive to it. And the principal responsibility of every one of your people, as it says in Psalm 24 or 27, this one thing I ask, that I might dwell in the temple of God, that I might gaze on your beauty. Lord, may each of us look with a heart full of passion and delight upon our heavenly husband. So much so that nothing this world offers, or the enticements that Satan would try to throw in front of us, would have any effect on us. For our hearts burn with such devotion and such love for Christ, our heavenly husband. Pray that, Lord, you would work that in each of our hearts now. In Jesus' name, amen.